Welcome to Integrated Insights with ICCG. For more than 30 years, our team has partnered with small business owners to prepare for and navigate the business transaction process. Pull up a chair as we share stories and insights from our experience on all sides of the M&A table. All right, welcome back to the Integrated Insights podcast. My name is Michael. I'm your host today, joined by Mason and Andrew. Today, we're going to be talking about deal killers. So to start out, guys, who can kill a deal?
This is one of my favorite topics, deal killers. It's so fun. Who can kill a deal? I will say, really anybody that's involved with the deal, right? I think we've said before, there's a buyer, there's a seller party, there's the M&A advisor, right? There's an attorney, there's a banker, there's CPAs. There are so many people that can be involved in the deal, and what you don't want is for nobody to quarterback it, and I think that's the importance of the right advisor. I know there are some poor intermediaries, but there are really great ones, and the good ones quarterback it and make sure everybody's on the same page, that we're moving forward. And one of the worst things that could happen is for somebody to draw out the deal, and you get deal fatigue, and that's just, you never want that. And so I would say anybody could really kill the deal. But really the advisor's job, our job, is to make sure that we're keeping on task.
That's great. So you mentioned that a good advisor, a good intermediary, they're going to quarterback the deal. How do they quarterback the deal in a way that moves toward a successful deal completion?
I think part of my job has been keeping the ball rolling, making sure that things are getting done timely, thinking about the communication between the buyer and the seller and quarterbacking that well. And then with the attorneys, just making sure that they're on top of it, that they have what they need in order to complete the purchase agreement. Just helping keeping the ball rolling and speeding that up is our job.
Yeah, I think there are many goals to the ultimate goal, right? We want to make sure we're driving towards initially the engagement letter, right? That's one goal that we have with our client. We got to make sure we're working towards that. We want to make sure we work towards putting it on the market, right? So there's this whole prep phase, and we've got to get our client to send us information. And so getting them to send information is no small task. And so you have to keep that ball rolling and make sure that is consistently happening, so that you can get everything that you need in order to put it on the market. And then when you're talking to a buyer, the goal is to get to an offer, right? To get to a signed LOI. And so pushing the buyer towards that. And then during due diligence, Mason, we make, that's the reason we make weekly calls with the buyer, right? So that we all know what the status is, and we're all on the same page, moving towards the same goal. We include the attorneys on that, and everything. Every time that we do that, something will come up. Oh, I didn't catch that. I do need to do that. We assign tasks to make sure that everything gets done, and that's, each phase is a little different on how we quarterback it, and how we push things along. But it is important that we push it along.
Communication, right? We got to follow up. We got to update. And with all the parties involved, we just got to make sure everybody's on the same page. That's awesome. So talking a little bit about due diligence, what are the key elements of due diligence that a business can overlook? Is there anything through the due diligence process that companies just don't think about or they miss?
I think where my mind goes with that is legal. I think a lot of times they can kind of push things under the rug. Oh, that wasn't that big of a deal, or that was a long time ago.
Yep.
And it may be a long time ago, or it may not have been a big deal, but just get it on the table. I think that's one area of due diligence that can get overlooked.
We just had one deal where we went over, the attorney went over vendor agreements, and we're on the buy side, and the attorney asked our client a question. Hey, this agreement isn't signed. It's a key contract that you have, and it's not signed. Do you have the signed one? And we didn't. And so, things like that, now we have to go get it. Right. And so all those things, I mean, you're right. That is overlooked. And it's important to kind of revisit those things.
So what about market conditions in a specific industry? Does it ever happen where the market conditions or how well that industry is performing as a whole affects the closure of a deal?
And when you're in due diligence, not as much. And the reason is because you've kind of gotten around that, right? I mean, obviously, if you're doing a deal in oil and gas and oil and gas tanks, then the deal's probably not going to get done, right? It's just the buyer's going to go away. But aside from that, I mean, when you're in due diligence, even if as long as it's not a year-long due diligence, right? I mean, if you're in a shorter due diligence of max 3 years or 3 months, I think the market isn't going to do most of the time. It's not going to do very much to affect the deal. It might change minutely, different terms. Oh, we have to do this, we have to do that. But really, it's whether it's going to actually kill the deal overall, most likely not. And so I think that's what I would say to that. I think more so it happens when something changes in the business, right? An event happens. There's a customer loss, or the performance of the company changes because of something specific, something drastic. It's never really, hey, what's going on in the market? But yeah, I think that's what I would say.
Does the interest and economic environment, right? So we talked about the market and fluctuations there, but what about as interest rates go up and down, the economy goes up and down as a whole? How can those affect a deal closure? Or do they?
Yeah, I think not so much. Again, once an LOI has been signed, not so much, because they won't drastically change within that short period of time. I would say the way that, especially interest rates, it changes for the ways that buyers approach a deal, and so they may try to be a little bit more strategic in the way they're funding things. A lot of people are fans of seller notes and rolling over equity and or earnouts. There are different ways to fund a deal outside of the bank. If you're using a bank, then I mean that's great, but the interest rate is okay. I can only get so much for it. I can only afford so much for it. But there are ways that we can be strategic to get around it. And so it only changes the way that a buyer approaches a deal.
Yeah. So basically you're saying that someone different might come to the table, but it's not going to look different pretty much from that LOI to closing type of situation.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
That's great. So let's go back to Andrew. You kind of rattled off a list of people at the beginning of the podcast about who can kill a deal, right? Which is really just anyone involved in it. Mm-hmm. So let's dig into some of those people a little bit more and talk about what that can look like. How a person, a different professional or different member of management. So let's start with a banker. You just kind of mentioned financials a little bit. How can a bank or a banker kill a deal?
Not getting the loan quick enough. I mean, I think of a deal that we did with the ERs. I mean, it took him like 6 months to try to get a loan, if I remember correctly. It didn't kill the deal, but I mean, it could have. And so I think bankers, having a good banker on your side that can get financing quickly is super important. Going back to the overall market conditions and how that plays, my mind went back to the deal we did with the fence company, where that industry prices were great for them. Materials were so expensive, but they started to see that decrease in price, and it's something the buyer knew was coming, and so it didn't freak them out. But I think that was during COVID as well, so I think that that didn't kill the deal because they knew it was coming, but something where if they didn't know it was coming, it could have. I don't know.
Not all buyers will see it coming, and that you're right. That does affect them.
Yeah.
And even if they do, they may not know what to do with it, right? They may say, oh, we see that thing coming, but we don't know what to do with that thing that's coming, right? So that could be a huge deal. Awesome. Thanks, Mason. So going back to the people, some of the people that were mentioned in the beginning of the podcast, talk about how members of the management team can affect whether a deal closes.
Yeah, I mean, I think I referenced this in another episode, but just the management team are going to be the ones typically that will help in due diligence, if it's a CFO or whoever, so they can help the deal by getting timely information, getting the correct information over to us. That way we can provide it for the buyer. But I think we've also seen management that are family members or very loyal team members to the owner, and they don't want it to sell. They don't want the company to sell because they don't want the owner to go. And I think that at times they can, because of that, they will try to sabotage the deal and talk the owner out of it, and so they can kill the deal that way.
That's great. So what about lawyers? I know lawyers are part of pretty much every deal. How can lawyers kill a deal?
By being lawyers. I think it's important to keep them on task. I say this, advisors need to stay on task as well, but for an attorney to make sure that we're not focusing on items that don't really need to be focused on, that aren't necessarily a part of this deal. Not every deal is the same, and so you're not going to get the same components on one deal as the next. And so if you don't have an experienced transaction attorney, those are the ones that might get a little bit more hung up on things that aren't related to this deal. And so it's important for us to make sure we're on task. And so I know it can cause things to delay. And so not every attorney is the same. And there are attorneys that are way more experienced with transactions, and not all of them are great either, but you have to find the right attorney that knows the business and that knows transactions, right? And that's what we ask for our clients hey, do you know an attorney? Do you know what their experience is? And if you don't have one, we work with a few all the time. And so it's easy for us to refer them to an attorney. But that's what I'd say is how they how they can delay a deal or kill a deal.
Yeah. By the time a lawyer is typically brought into the transaction process, the big rocks have already been decided, right? So that when they try to introduce a new big rock to the conversation, if the two sides don't see eye to eye, they don't have a choice but to end the deal, right? So it can be kind of tricky. All right, that's great. So what about advisors? What about us, other advisors, other intermediaries? How can an advisor kill a deal?
I think just slow playing on our end, and not communicating what needs to be communicated to the lawyer or the buy side as well. Those are my 2 cents.
Yeah, I would say most advisors don't have the business operation experience, and so and don't
understanding of the
understand
business.
Yeah, and so they may, just like I mentioned with the attorneys, they may bring in something that isn't related to the deal or to the business, right? And so, or they may miss something that is important in the business. And so, if you have an advisor that has done software deals, and that's what they're used to, and then all of a sudden comes along construction. Well, construction accounting is very different, and I know we're not accountants, but there are some key things that are going to be important for the working capital calculation and all those things. And so really, if an advisor misses something, it can kill a deal. And so having the right advisor, I mean, there are times where I will say, hey, I'm not familiar. We are not familiar with this business and this type of business enough. I can't say that I'm comfortable with this. And if you have an advisor that is way more experienced in this specific niche, great, go for it. I'll still help in any way that I can if you have any questions. But at the end of the day, you have to have the right advisor.
Yeah. Yeah. We're going to make them aware of us not having experience in that industry, right? But simultaneously help them as much as possible. It's amazing how many industries we've helped business owners in. So last one to dig into a little bit here, right before we wrap up the podcast. What about the buyer and the seller? How can the buyer and the seller themselves sabotage a deal or kill a deal?
I think with the buyer, I think it sum it up with integrity. I think if they say they're going to pay a certain price, they're going to do it. But we've seen people that say they're going to pay a certain price and then they retrade. And you know, obviously that kills deals. I think also with the buy side, throughout the course of due diligence, they ask the owners a lot of the same questions. And I think that can kind of that can kind of annoy the business owner. And they're covering things that they've already covered, and you know, just gets old.
Asking the same question over and again, even though they've already had an answer. Yep.
When you get, I mean, these are the two main parties of the deal, right? And so, if they're not in agreement, then it's probably not a good thing, right? You've got to make sure you're in agreement and that they're on the same page. And so even personality wise, you have a lot of our clients they're blue collar people, and a lot of times they could be selling to a private equity group, and these private equity groups, they'll come in and they'll ask questions that, hey, I don't know what the heck EBITDA is or WIP or, you know, all these abbreviations, and what are you talking about CapEx, you know, and not, I mean, look, that's I will say, it's not in their everyday language. And so it's not that they're not intelligent. It's just that why do I have to know that in order to run my business? Right. And it's not needed to, you know, they don't need to know certain things in order to be successful. But but they're going to be asked questions that don't make sense to them. They only make sense to the PE group, and so they the good PE groups will understand that and really reframe their questions. We will do that for them as well. We'll interpret, but if they're not on the same page, it can kill the deal. And I know, you can kind of go through. You can go down the road of due diligence, and I know the seller can say, I'm tired of it. I don't want to deal with that. That's not how I want to do business. And so that's why we try to set expectations up front. But that's important for us. I think, just like Mason said, it's an integrity issue where you're going back on your word on either party, right? We've had somebody tell us, I need 50 million for my business. Okay, well, all right, we got 50 million, and then and he wasn't specific about how he wanted to. I'm okay with rolling some over or being a part of doing some seller financing. But then all of a sudden later on, he told us, no, I want everything up front, and it's got to be 55. Well, okay, come on now. And that's going back on your word, and it kills the deal, right? It can. And so it just like retrading, and this can happen on the opposite side. And so both sellers and buyers are, they are probably, there are many ways that they can kill deals. Let's be real, right? Many ways that a buyer or a seller can kill a deal. But at the end of the day, you just have to be on the same page.
Yeah. I'm thinking of being on the same page. I'm thinking of a deal that we worked on, and everyone thought they were on the same page in terms of the employment agreement. The guy was staying on afterwards, but everything that was said was just in conversation. It was never in writing. And so we're like, okay, we need to get this thing in writing. We get it in writing, and then the seller is like, wait a minute, I don't know.
That's not what I agreed to.
That's not what I'm agreeing to. Mm-hmm. And so that's another area of an employment agreement, not getting that in writing, that can kill a deal.
That's great. Yeah, we talked about communication a lot earlier on, right? And I think to double down on something that Andrew said, so sometimes people come to the table and they don't know. They don't know some of the stuff we're talking about. But later on, if that comes out and they figure out what it is and it does impact their decision, impact the deal, then it can feel like integrity regardless, right? So to our listeners, if you're sitting on the buyer or the seller side of the table, ask the question, right? You're there to understand, and the information's being put in front of you so that you have it in front of you. But if you don't understand it, that's why we're there. That's why we're there, to help you understand and to help you come toward an agreement together. So that's awesome. Well, Andrew, Mason, thank you for being here today. That's all the time we have for today. And that wraps up another episode of Integrated Insights with ICCG. Be sure to subscribe and stay tuned for more stories from our team. We love hearing from our listeners. If you have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover, please send us an email in the show notes. For more information about ICCG, please check us out on our website or follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube. Until next time, there's always a seat at our table.